Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking in our latest Trade to Black podcast powered by Dutchie, new title sponsor of the Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dale's got a big podcast here today as we've got two guests coming up. First, Anthony Coniglio. He's going to talk about some of the stuff that we discussed on Monday. What a banger podcast that was with Marc Cohodes. Talked about timeline of cannabis reform, possibly seeing later this summer. We'll ask Anthony if he agrees with that timeline. As well, in segment number 2 on Psychedelic Market Minute, we'll have Christian Agermar to talk about the big news, clinical results from Atai Life Sciences yesterday, which was big, including a $50 million private placement. So with that, let's welcome in AV here on a Wednesday. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. The music wasn't playing on the intro. I was kind of thinking my AirPods were short circuiting, but now we're good.
I thought I had mute on my computer, but good to hear that I can hear you. How are things on a Wednesday? Yeah, doing well.
Good.
Ready for a long weekend?
Market is doing great today. Crypto and everything else is moving up, even with cannabis. Tilray had a hell of a day for once.
Yeah,
it's been a nice week. We've got speculation going around, and I saw that Marijuana Moment reported today. I think that the Smart and Safe campaign has attained over 700,000 signatures for Florida to get adult use on the ballot in 2026.
How many? How many did you say?
Over 700,000. I think they have to get 1 million is the threshold, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully it's not the same campaign as last time. Probably yield the same results with Ron DeSantis sitting in office. So we'll see. Hopefully cooler heads will prevail in that process.
Irish, thanks for letting me know. Nope, just the intro. Good to know. And Gary, yes, liked our last guest, which was Marc Cohodes. Wish you didn't hate on Canada so much. And yes, did push back on that. Look, there's a lot of great Canadian companies. And as we said, it's not just in BC. They've got EU GMP facilities that they're exporting across the world, especially into Germany, where 80% of it does come from Canada. So I like Marc. I think he has a lot of great takes. He had a lot of great information, but I will respectfully disagree with the things that he said about Canada, which I think he can appreciate and understand. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But yes, there are definitely some players, especially in a federal legalized country with not a lot of parameters basically stopping them from doing certain things. The country has grown exponentially. They've learned the hard way, I think, in a market of that size, but you can understand now why we've had a lot of great sentiment around the Canadian LPs because of the international exporting opportunities as these countries start to develop more. And with that, obviously, you can see the last 5-6 years of being in a federally legalized country. There's been a lot of growth and learning that I think a lot of these companies have learned. So I'll just put that to bed, and hopefully, I think a lot of people agree with that sentiment, what I just outlined.
Yeah, it's pretty much on point. It was also interesting to see Derek Maltz tweet yesterday. He was tweeting something that everybody kind of at face value took as like an anti-cannabis, like anti-rescheduling stance, when it was really about the impact of Chinese illicit marijuana being on the market and legitimizing the industry to a certain extent. If you read the fine print, was interesting to see. He was engaging with a lot of the Anon accounts that a lot of people follow on Twitter, that not to cheapen them, like most of them have pretty good takes. But it was kind of funny to see a government official just engaging with a bunch of random accounts on Twitter. But the message was illicit Chinese grows being in the United States, and that was kind of paramount to the messaging.
Derek Maltz, he was that interim title for how long? Was it a month? Was it or so? Was it?
I'm not sure the duration of his interim title, but he was the interim DEA admin.
Be nice to get him on. I know that
I tweeted at him today, said, you have an open invite if you ever want to come on the channel. I know Todd Harrison's a friend, so hopefully maybe there's a little bit of back channeling going on there. But we'd love to have him on, talk about his stance. Doesn't necessarily have to be about rescheduling. It could also just be about the illicit grows in the United States and how clamping down on them would be a major benefit of legalization and standardizing this industry in the United States once and for all.
Yeah. Hello to our Canadian viewers as well. Justin, hope you all had a great Canada Day. You as well, my friend. OG Grandma 420 writes, Canada Day fireworks at Lake. I'm going to butcher this. OSOUs were awesome. I have never been there. I don't know where it is. So feel free to outline where that is. And maybe I'll check it out next year. And David Benz, Justin, whispers about ER next week, ? I assume that you're thinking something related to reform. I can't I can't say that it's practical. I don't think that's practical. But one thing that's interesting is that this.
No. I think Tilray reports earnings next week.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It was about Tilray up top.
Tilray had banger of day. Yes, it did. Okay. I know we want to get into the live stream today, and we want to talk about some of the things that we discussed on Monday, because we always like to hear different takes. With that, let's welcome back good friend of the podcast, CEO of NewLake Capital, Anthony Coniglio. Happy Wednesday. I'm sure you are looking forward to a long weekend this weekend in America, but man, what a great time of year. Don't you just love this weather?
Yeah, I do. Listen, summer's in full swing. Happy Canada Day. Happy 4th of July. It's a great week to be Canadian or American.
I know, isn't it? Let's just hope we can get these trade talks.
Every week is a great week to be Canadian or American. Let's be real.
Let's get these trade talks confirmed in the next couple of weeks, and put this digital tax aside. But I know when I'm traveling to the U.S., which I'll do again tomorrow morning, because I'm going to head up to northern Michigan for a couple of days. But it's been a little testy when you go through customs. They ask you a lot more questions, and I know what's going on. But at the end of the day, it's just, we're Canada, we're America, we're buddies. Let's stop with all the drama, right?
Yeah, I was up in Toronto a few weeks ago, and one of my colleagues was traveling. Yes, I was. It was a quick day. It was a quick turnaround for a series of meetings. But someone was supposed to meet me up there here from the U.S., and they returned back at the border for an issue of passport that I think previously would have been kind of a no-brainer. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of testiness between the two countries. Yeah. It's unfortunate. But listen, the relationship is long. We'll get past it.
Yeah, I hear you. Listen, we talked about a few things on Monday, including some of the Canadian stuff. We won't get into that, but we did want to bring you on, as you probably saw the live stream. In fact, one of the questions that I asked Marc, you text me during the live stream, which I thought was great. But real quick to top line it, Marc Cohodes, he thinks cannabis reform is coming a lot sooner than what most people expect. He's calling for a Trump-led move before September, possibly tied to safe banking, rescheduling, or a federal tax model. So you and I talked a little bit after the live stream. Do you agree with that timeline? If not, what makes you think differently? And look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and contest it, because history has shown whenever we get our hopes up, it's only delayed even more. So how are you approaching this, and what are you seeing and hearing?
Yeah, listen, I'm thrilled. I thought that was a great podcast that you had on, a great show you had on Monday. And I thought Marc you're very knowledgeable about the industry. I love the way he's really dove into the industry, and specifically his support for some of the positions in the sector, notably Glass House. I'm not going to disagree with anything that he said. He's basing that off of the information that he has available to him. So perhaps he has some particular insight. Having been around this sector for 6 years, and gosh, we've spoken a lot, guys. You know my approach. I'm not necessarily an expert in the politics or in the legal aspects, but I sit here and I try to study what are the motivations, and we keep coming back to the political motivations, or really what moves policy reform here. And when I think about reform, particularly around Schedule 3, and I know a lot of people have been saying we need to deschedule, free the plant. We could all agree about that. That's just not happening. I would be shocked if it was descheduled. Just not happening. In fact, the federal government has a recommendation from HHS that everybody says that we should all be listening to. And by the way, the recommendation is Schedule 3. So I'm going to take for the moment, whether right or wrong, I'm going to take for the moment off the table that descheduling. And so what gets us to the rescheduling? What gets us to policy reform with this administration? And my perspective is, I think it's going to take longer than that, barring Trump really putting his shoulder behind this, which I question if it's politically motivating for him to do so at this point in time. I think if they really want to play the politics of this, they'll wait till right before the midterms to do so. But rather, I do think we have a window of opportunity in the fall, call it between September and February, for a package of policy reforms, if we're going to get reform out of this administration.
A question for both of you. Do you think, I'm getting the impression with some of the stuff that people are feeling like if reform does happen, that we just get rescheduling announced right away. But is that practical, or do you think the ALJ hearing will eventually resume? And that's really either one of you can take. But go ahead, Anthony.
I'm going to bet that the ALJ hearing does not resume.
You don't.
If we're going to get rescheduling, it's going to be actions outside of the box of the current process. I think they scrapped the ALJ. They go straight to rescheduling, as they should have from the beginning. The institution and the establishment will have lost if we get rescheduling, because we obviously saw that they were playing a dog and pony show via that ALJ on several fronts from the DEA. And I don't think that they would be acting adversarially moving forward, coming down from the executive branch. Obviously, I could be completely wrong, but my gut says that if we do get rescheduling, it's because Trump says, hey, reschedule the damn thing, scrap this process, and get it done. And that's going to mean circumventing the ALJ. That was a complete circus from the get-go, even though, as per Pennington will back it up, the record has been set and there's a lot of precedent within that ALJ, but I think that just goes by the wayside.
Yeah, and Anthony Coniglio, like, don't you think there's some truth to that? Looking at this new administration and how Trump probably gets things done, or do you see it differently?
I actually see it differently. Here's how we make a market. I think there's a 2/3% chance we get the ALJ, and here's why. I see there being 3 potential outcomes. If the DEA doesn't want to reschedule, they can either have an ALJ meeting or they can scrap the whole thing. If they want to reschedule, they can have the ALJ meeting or scrap the whole thing. So you actually have 4 potential paths. If you want to scrap the whole thing, you could either do that and cancel everything, or you could proceed with the ALJ hearing and just drag it out. You could just drag it out and not do anything or start the ALJ again. But it's within the context of, if you do want to get something done, well, then you could either do the ALJ hearing, get it back on track, and then use the fulsome of the process. There's Administrative Procedures Act, which does give the DEA the option to go back. But if they scrap the ALJ and they want reform to happen, they know they're opening themselves up to inevitable lawsuits.
Right.
There's no way that there won't be lawsuits. And given that the record's been set already, I think they're going to be in deeper stuff and take longer to really get to rescheduling if they scrap the ALJ and take on all those lawsuits, versus go the ALJ route, have that broader, more vibrant record for the inevitable lawsuits on the other side, and be able to get through those much quicker. And so if they want to get it, I think they go the ALJ route.
Trump is so common, though, and I know he's not the only one involved, but this is a man that's very accustomed to lawsuits. I believe he's going to make an announcement. If he makes an announcement, it's going to be at a left field. But again, I'm not a lawyer, and there's some strong possibilities that this could get dragged out. I see that being more practical under the previous administration. However, expect the unexpected with this, but it'll remain to be seen. One thing that actually, there's a comment here that I thought was interesting too, as to why I brought this up. Gary writes, what intrigued me about Monday was Marc's comment about our Texas governor getting a late call, and a late call kind of alluding to people from Washington. Not sure if it's real or not, but very interesting perspective. This is basically in relation to Governor Abbott vetoing the bill at the last minute and getting a call from Washington. Who that was, who knows? But to me, that's, whether he's telling, I don't think he's going to say something out there if it wasn't accurate, but I think that was a rather interesting take as well. Did you hear that part, Anthony, AC?
I certainly did hear it, and it just reminds us of how political decisions are in this country, and particularly around this topic of cannabis. I think any of us that focus on it, they want people to do, quote unquote, the right thing. But when we're dealing with politicians, they're going to do what is politically expedient for them in their political career, by and large, and particularly on this topic. Well,
time will tell, right?
And time will tell. And you know what's also interesting, if I can, I did an op-ed earlier today that came out earlier today, talking about reform, talking about rescheduling, and what is the motivation of the DEA. And I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of months thinking about, okay, where do we go? Do we think it's reasonable the DEA would do this, want to pursue rescheduling? Because a lot of people say that the DEA doesn't want rescheduling at all. And so I actually did a bunch of research, and what I found was that it's not coincidental that we're seeing all of this cartel action, and we're seeing a lot of illicit grows being shut down. There is and people want to know, what would a new DEA administrator do if he were to be confirmed? What would call a DEA administrator do if he was confirmed? Well, we have something called the National Drug Threat Assessment that's issued every year by the DEA, and it's a report to Congress. And it really is a roadmap of priorities for the DEA. And if you're an incoming administrator, you're going to follow that roadmap. And in fact, if you look at what Cole said at his confirmation hearing, very similar to the priorities in the threat assessment. He spoke about fentanyl, and he spoke about these TCOs, trans criminal organizations like Chinese and Mexican cartels. And he said to the senators in that hearing that that was the number one focus when he gets in. Yes, later on, in response to a question, he said it would be a priority to take a look at cannabis. But for sure, his focus is fentanyl, methamphetamines, and and TCOs. You then also have the intelligence community annually reports to Congress in the intelligence community threat assessment. And if you look at this year's, for the first time ever, trans criminal organizations, or TCOs, top the list ahead of Iran, ahead of Russia, and ahead of South Korea as a threat to our national security. So it shouldn't be surprising with that backdrop
doing this. Wow.
To see the federal government using all of its force. And that effort in California was massive. Hundreds and hundreds of law enforcement and federal soldiers were used, National Guard were used to go in and raid those grows. And so the government's telling us what they're going to focus on.
Yeah.
And so if you really want to get at trans criminal organizations, and you're seeing a lot more focus on these TCOs, the DEA has an opportunity with rescheduling to implement a more regulatory infrastructure, a more regulated infrastructure for the state legal cannabis industry to register with the DEA, just the way other companies that manufacture Schedule III drugs do. And that would allow them to better differentiate between state legal businesses and these TCOs, and be able to make sure that the illicit product coming in from those TCOs into the state legal business is identified and pursued by federal and state authorities. And so it's a little bit of a big picture think piece, but the stage is set there for the DEA to want to embrace reform to a Schedule III to enhance their tools to get at TCOs, to get at the Chinese cartels and the Mexican cartels.
Yes.
Which is this big priority for this administration.
Well, wouldn't banking reinforce that notion as well, going after the TCOs, et cetera? Because allowing legitimate cannabis companies to bank, then you're adding another layer of KYC, AML. The cannabis companies become legit from a financial perspective, and those TCOs and those rogue organizations, they now can't operate even under the guise of a state legal business, because once their information is in and they're snuffed out within the financial institutions, they've got no leg to stand on.
I totally agree. And I think our best shot for lasting reform as an industry is if there was more of a policy press briefing where the administration came out multi-agency and said, our number one threat to this company is these TCOs and these Chinese and Mexican cartels. And we've stated that. And the best way, the way they're most impacting America is through exploiting the gap between state and federal marijuana laws. And guess what, Congress, you failed for years and years. And we, the administration, are going to fix this by putting forth a series of policy reforms. One is to finalize this rescheduling. Two is we're asking you to put safe banking on the president's desk, maybe even go as far as states or something like that. But a policy around regulation. Oh, and guess what? They might even roll in hemp to figure out how to close that. I don't want to call it the loophole, but how to rectify hemp and cannabis. Like that would be a real responsible policy approach by the administration. And that's the way you can get senators and congressmen and women to get behind reform, to have a holistic approach. So if we can get that,
agreed,
man, that would be lasting reform.
Yeah.
So but with everything you just said, I completely agree with. And if you're looking at it logically, doesn't that kind of make you think that it gives Trump the perfect argument to legitimize cannabis? Because he's legitimizing cannabis reaching one side of the aisle. And then on the other side, if the messaging is we're going after TCOs, illegal Chinese organizations, the cartels, et cetera, the MAGA base is not going to be up in arms about that. They're essentially either going to shrug it off and or agree with him, because that is what's resonating most right now, is him getting these organizations that have their tentacles in Americans' day-to-day lives out of the country. It honestly seems like the perfect storm from a messaging and a political standpoint for him to move on it, because then the senators also get cover fire with that topic on both sides. It's actually a perfect double-edged sword.
I agree. And the question is, when do the pieces fall into place? Can you do that before Cole gets into office? Do you let Cole get confirmed first? Like what are the pieces that have to happen? Because this also has to be paired with a regulatory infrastructure in order to accomplish these goals. And so you just don't make that up overnight. So hopefully people are working on that. This is hopeful thinking, but it takes time to do that. So I don't think that we're going to get reform kind of overnight. I think if we want that lasting reform, maybe you get a tweet. Okay, it's a tweet. Does that really provide reform? If we really want lasting reform, I think we're going to need this more holistic approach by this administration.
Yeah, that's for sure. That was a wild story 2 weeks ago with those 500 DEA agents that had that raid at that farm. And what was it? There was illegal undocumented farm workers hiding in hours in 113-degree heat. But one thing's for sure, if the U.S. government and the Trump administration have outlined what they're going to do, it's pretty clear that they're following up with everything that they promised during this campaign trail back from last fall. But to all your points that you just outlined, they aren't messing around. And
no, and you look at their own words. In my piece, I looked at this. I looked at this report that the DEA puts out annually. I looked at it, the version 15 years ago versus the version that came out this year. 15 years ago, marijuana was mentioned, I forget the total number of times in the executive summary. This year, it's not mentioned once in the executive summary. And in fact, the mention of cannabis is down 75%.
Yeah.
And when it is mentioned 15 years ago, it was mentioned in the context of protecting people's health from consuming. Now it's mentioned in the context of illegal cartels and pesticides in the final product. And so you can definitely see the shift. And if you look at the recordings from that bust out in California, the DEA agent on site in his commentary, he acknowledged that it was legal in California, and he emphasized the human trafficking and the pesticides when he was talking about it and talking about safety for the community. He wasn't talking about keeping marijuana out of the hands of Californians. He was talking about getting rid of those illegal activities, getting rid of the human trafficking and the pesticides, and making sure that there's quality product in the California market.
How about that tweet's been going viral? Somebody got a screenshot of Matt Gaetz's laptop, and as there's some ties with TrueLeave there and the amount of money and compensation. I don't know how much I believe into that, but I'm actually going to do an evergreen and get people thinking on that later this week. But,
I'm willing to bet that was fake.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Don't forget, AI do so much.
David Benz, this is good. Don't forget Gates. Florida has a lot of influence. Trump lives there. Bonnie lives there. AV lives there. They love you, AV, in Florida. There you go. There's the influence. I got back from Berlin. I'll ask you one last question. And I was going to actually stop off on the way back in London, but my God, it's just a change of flight. It was crazy expensive. But I know that you headed over to Cannabis Europa. A lot of people I saw in Germany were heading over there, but a lot of great positive sentiment that's going on in the European market right now. And I know it's something that you've kept your eye on, and, eventually you plan to deploy capital in the European market of what you said in the past. But if you could give kind of a takeaway to our viewers here in North America as to what's transpiring, what's growing, and really the investment opportunities for a lot of the American players that are involved in the European market, what would you say?
Yeah, I was over there last week. It was a great conference that they put on. I participated on a panel regarding lessons learned from the U.S. Cannabis market regarding capital and how the Europeans can learn. Here's my takeaway. They are 5 to 7 years behind us in terms of scale and maturity of the market. There's a tremendous amount of excitement and enthusiasm around what's going on in Germany. There's excitement for what could be out of the Netherlands, what could be out of Spain, what could be out of France, what could be out of the UK. So there's excitement. However, what I would say is that there continues to be meaningful uncertainty. In Germany, you do have the risk that this new government that stepped into power a couple of months ago, while they said they wouldn't touch the cannabis program, they said they will revisit it in the fall. And there's been lots of negative stories coming out of that program regarding the telehealth and the abuse of the
too easy.
Telehealth in Germany. And so there is some regulatory risk to that program. The UK, while it's a really small medical program, it's hard to see how that industry in the UK scales up quickly. France is going to look to expand or create a program and be very small and grow. But again, they're going to move slowly. And I think a lot of these countries are looking to Germany to see, how does it work in Germany? Let's see 2, 3, 4 years of evidence in Germany before we actually make our plans and implement any sort of meaningful reform. And so I think there's long-term, if you've got a really long-term view, I don't think you're going to see a lot change significantly in Europe across those different countries. I think it'll be slow growth.
Yes.
But what's attractive really long-term is the socialist approach to medicine. Once these countries get behind it and you get the country as the payor, then, really unlocks medicine. The last thing I'd say is their approach over there is very pharma, very, very pharma. Completely different feel than going to a conference here in the US.
Paul even said, I was talking to Paul though when he was there too, and he's like, I don't think these pilot programs, these social clubs is really going to go anywhere, but there's a huge upside potential for the medical side. I don't see it going back as far as the German market, even with the new government. But what I do see is changes when it comes to telehealth, telemedicine. There needs to be a lot more restrictions on who's prescribing what and what are the, proper procedures as someone actually being prescribed that. But as we've learned the last couple of weeks, it's just great to see that, you can't have big pharma companies lobbying a lot of these doctors to prescribe certain things, which is a lot different. And some of our guests in the past have said the difference between the US and what we have here in Germany is we actually look at the real data versus actual opinions. So you're right. It's going to be a slow rollout, but all eyes will be on Germany and how that develops. But what a turnout it was in Germany. I was thinking I should have went to Cannabis Europa, which, would have been great too. But over 200.
I heard that there were 65,000 people that showed up to the German conference. But a lot of it was obviously consumers that traveled in.
There was
atmosphere.
There was more than that. It was massive. And when I could explain to you, it was kind of cool seeing a crowd of 500 walk around Mike Tyson. Then he runs through this gate and he sits down right next to me. And I'm like, all right, it's showbiz. Let's go. And, anyways, I had a few people from Germany wondering who's this guy with a receding hairline in his late 40s having this podcast. But it was cool to do that. But listen, always good to catch up. We always like to see things from a different perspective. And that way people can kind of get their own take on what they think is going to happen next. But again, we always like to have people on that have different voices with different sides of opinion, but more importantly, get people that have actually some information to back things up on what they believe. So always appreciate you checking in here today, and let's keep in touch. Okay. And happy Independence Day.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds great, guys. Yeah. Thank you very much. And to everybody else out there.
All right. Thanks, Anthony. Let's keep in touch. All right, that concludes segment number 1, and we're going to keep things rolling along here. It's time for Psychedelic Market Minute, our psychedelic piece this week. With that, Arms, let's roll things. Good afternoon, Trade to Black, powered by Dutchie, our new title sponsor here at the Trade to Black podcast. It's time for segment number 2, Psychedelic Market Minute, presented by PSIL, which trades on the New York Stock Exchange ARCA under the ticker symbol PSIL. Let's welcome in Mr. Christian Agermeyer, chairman of Atai Life Sciences, back to the podcast. Good to see you. How are things?
Hello, good to see you. All well. Sorry for the not perfect lighting. I'm in a hotel in Mallorca, but always have time for you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you checking in here today. Were you guys up too much yesterday as a company, or is this just another day for Atai Life Sciences?
Just another day. No, just kidding. So as you might, and hopefully your viewers know, if not, so we had amazing data for 5-MeO DMT professional. Our word is PPL03, which has been tested in treatment-resistant depression and got really amazing data. I would say one of the best data sets in neuroscience since a long time. And it also, which is very important, so it was a double win because 5-MeO-DMT had originally been sort of started or is owned by a company called Beckley Psytech.
Okay.
We had announced 4 weeks ago that
Yeah.
we completely acquiring Beckley, but we wanted to be 100% sure. So we had a condition, a closing condition, that the data has to be on a certain level. The data way exceeded that positively. So the merger is now proceeding with full speed, and it makes atai. We already were, but like now it makes us sort of the undoubted leader in psychedelic medicine.
Yeah, it's great. Well, look, in addition to that was the $50 million private placement by you. And you've always said, like, when you look at this sector and how hard it's been hit in the last couple of years because of rising interest rates, you're a firm believer that if interest rates were to come down, small tech, biotech stocks could rebound and rebound hard. But, with these latest results and the amount of money that you've put in, and then you factor in some of the recent announcements with the US government towards psychedelic research, like what phase of this industry are we heading into now in the back end of 2025? Because it seems to me there's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of, if you're watching and paying attention closely, there's some positive momentum that's starting to build.
I mean, yes, positive momentum is actually understated. Like I sound a little bit like a broken record, like when I was there on the show the last time, some months ago. And I always say, like, I deeply believe, meaning it's kind of bottoming out, at least it didn't go down further. The biotech market as a whole, I think, is about to rebound and rebound hard because it's the last sector. If I go through all of my different sectors, I'm looking at deep tech, like general tech, like whatever, they all Bitcoin, crypto, they all rebounded fully. Biotech is still at the lows. My theory was always biotech will then rebound when interest rates really come up. Like the other sectors are kind of more anticipating an interest rate cut. Biotech is the one, actually, by the way, similar weirdly to real estate, where people, I think, want to see real estate's coming down, but then the sector as a whole going to rebound hard. And within biotech, I still believe that psychedelic stocks, and especially atais, is the most undervalued one. It's just like, if I look at all the framework data, the size of the market, the state of our drugs, like phase 2B now, Compass, where we still own a stake, is in phase 3. This is not early stage. This is like soon to come to market. And the valuations just don't make sense. But hey, that's the opportunity. That's why I added concurrent to the data, another approximately 20 million myself. And by the way, that's why also our new second anchor shareholder next to me is a pharma company called Ferring, which is a very big privately held European pharma company. And they continuously added in the market. They actually invested 20 million when we announced the Beckley merger, and they invested 20 million again.
So with the stage that we're in now and with this data that came out, I think one of the most impressive things was the fact that the onset and the duration of the therapy, it was under that 2-hour mark. Is now when Big Pharma starts to sniff around with these therapies and with the data that we're seeing and this now going into a phase 3? Is this when they their ears perk up and they really start to look at this space?
100%. Because so the thing is, like when we talked about psychedelics the first time, really when we went public, like sort of 4 years ago, pharma it was never that pharma was like, oh, this doesn't work. Yeah. But pharma thought, oh, this is all going to be small, this is going to be fringe, whatever. But then you have Johnson & Johnson, and they have Spravato. Spravato is esketamine. It's not a real psychedelic. I always call it psychedelic-like. It has similar sort of effect sizes. However, you need to do it. One of the standard procedures is twice a week for 4 weeks. So 8 times. So you need to go to the clinic 8 times to achieve the same outcome as one session with 5-MeO-DMT. Which is clearly superior, like 5-MeO-DMT. And then hopefully we're going to have data soon, which shows if we add actually one more trip with 5-MeO-DMT, then that the effect size will be even much bigger. But so the two messages are, first, pharma sees now with this Spravato though, which is, again, I think a subpar solution, but markets predict like Johnson & Johnson's going to make like 3-4 billion revenues in 2027. So they see the potential. Then 5-MeO DMT especially is exactly fitting into that 2-hour treatment window. So we really run into open doors into a sort of existing infrastructure. And then our sort of 5-MeO DMT is much cheaper because you just do it one time, not 8 times.
But is that an advantage truly from the pharma model? Because obviously, I mean, we talk about a lot of pharma for profit, and from a patient perspective.
But they, first of all, like pharma doesn't fully control the doctors. It's actually more the payers, more the insurance companies, and they want capital efficient therapies. And by the way, it's not just 8 times the drug. It's also 8 times the nurse, 8 times the doctor. So the whole infrastructure 8 times. So what's going to happen is, by the way, to a certain extent, I don't want to promise anything, but like you can always negotiate with the insurers sort of kind of replacement costs. So we're going to go to them and say, you have at the moment, you have to pay for Spravato 8 times the drug and 8 times the whole infrastructure. Again, nurses, doctors, whatever. Why don't you pay us 2x of one Spravato session or 4x? You're still going to save half of it. Yeah. So it's not that we're just going to make 1/8 of Spravato. It's like we're going to be more expensive because we're like, you're going to save all the money for the doctors, the nurses, whatever. So at the end, by the way, I've never been more confident. I'm confident for the entire psychedelic range, but that 5-MeO DMT data combined with the commercial validity of it, like 2-hour treatment window, one-time use, whatever, that's a blockbuster drug.
Okay.
How do you think when you factor in 3 to 4 billion with Spravato, you know, when you talked about Big Pharma looking at it's too small, it's fringe 4 years ago for when you guys went public, but now we're 4 years later, and like with any good research, it's going to start to generate more and more attention. So as of now, based on conversations that you've had, like how is Big Pharma today viewing this industry?
They definitely, I think they always very slow, and at the end they pay much more for it. So it's not a bad thing, by the way. By the way, fairing, and I know Big Pharma is such a negative word, and fairing is such an amazing patient-centric company. The CEO is really visionary, young, driven, huge fan also of neuroscience and mental health and supporter. Yeah, but kind of fairing in a good way is Big Pharma. They're a huge company, and they increasing their stake in atai continuously. So I can't talk for them if they do more, but like they came out and verbally are very big supporters, again, obviously financially, of what we're doing. So it's kind of happening. We're always talking, when is Big Pharma coming? It's happening.
They're there.
They're building up their stake. Yeah. That doesn't mean, by the way, that atai cannot work with other pharma companies on an individual drug level. I'm actually expecting that we're going to do multiple deals over the next years, because like you have countries, think about Japan or whatever, who are very like sort of not isolated, but like shielded. You want to partner with a local pharma company there. Like you have maybe indications you want to go in. So again, very like just like big picture over the next years, not tomorrow, but like there will be more, I think, pharma partnerships for atai.
Yeah.
Are you more bullish on the administration and the way that the FDA and let's say the HHS are talking about psychedelics right now more than ever, as they're openly engaging in dialogue as it relates to veterans and psychedelics as a viable substance or viable therapy as it relates to mental illness?
Well, I want to say one thing, because it's a little bit lost in all of that the FDA has always been very supportive. Okay. And unfortunately, there was this Lykos drama last year.
Correct.
We want to go into that again, but like what I didn't found fair is that sort of Lykos kind of suggested that it was kind of a bias at the FDA, whatever, which by the way gave a lot of investors real fear that is the FDA, and that which it has never been, by the way. So we can't just say positive things about the FDA. So having said that, it's getting even better. And obviously them saying it now out loud is helping, especially a little bit to overcome that Lycos fear, oh, maybe the FDA is not as supportive, because they are, but like the fact that they're saying it out loud now helps a lot.
That's good to know.
Okay, so next steps, Atai, with these results, heading into a phase 3, we look at some of the key players in the space, and it seems like 2027 is a key year for commercialization. So what should we be paying attention to now that this data has been released? And really, as in addition to this, as far as your pipeline, some key, I guess, milestones that people should obviously track and keep paying attention to.
Well, so first, a shameless self-promotion. Pay attention to my Twitter. You really know what's first there. Because there is going to be a lot of things happening, like Atai alone. So we're going to have more open label data for 5-MeO DMT.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to file for our end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA. Then we're expecting phase 2 data for our MDMA, which is a sort of novel version of MDMA for the first quarter next year. We're expecting phase 2 data for our DMT, our very novel formula DMT. So the next 9 months, so to say, it's going to be a sort of orgy of hopefully good news, but I'm very, very optimistic. And again, I think we are in this sort of triangle positive of biotech is really, you feel it. Like I was at this Jefferies healthcare conference, and for the first time it was packed. There were investors, there were generalists coming back. Like sort of the mood was, it's very hard to describe, but it's just like a year ago, this was really depressing.
Yeah,
I was choking on. I should bring some mushrooms to biotech conferences. But now biotech, it really feels like it's coming back. And again, interest rates will come down, whatever. So you have interest rates coming down, biotech coming back. Then you have the whole administration really publicly stating this is a key priority. And then you have the individual Atai news flow for the next 9 months.
Yeah. Well, what I like right now, the space in right now, like I don't want to bring up Lycos. There was a lot of complications as to how that trial was run. But what I see right now, in addition to yourself, is Compass, MindMed, Cybin. Like, forgive me if I'm missing anybody else, but there's some real strong trials that are taking place that actually has a reflection on the industry as a whole. And if you're this new industry that's trying to break through into biotech, I would sit here and say, like, I don't want to say like what happens to one company may have an effect from a trading and investing perspective. It has had that kind of effect traditionally, but as a whole, outside of Atai, when you look at all these companies and the trials that are being done, that has to be what's attracting a lot of investors right now based on the results that are being proven, the companies, the financial situations that they're in. But that's the thing. I think, as we look at this industry and the amount of companies that has really scaled down and become smaller, it appears that we're at this stage where you have real companies doing real research that are providing some good data, which is promising for the space and attracting both retail and institutional investors, is it not?
Yeah, 100% agree. What is also happening, but like sort of obviously how you say, you always look at your child as the most prettiest one. Like
I get it.
Right. Yeah.
But what is also happening, so I think very positive what you said, sort of the more confirmation people get that psychedelics do work, the better. The other thing is, I think people start though now actually that we are getting closer to approval to think about what we just discussed for 5-MeO DMT versus Spravato about the commercial viability. And at the end, one of the very my simple formulas, others might see different, is the shorter the better. Because if I obviously get the same results, more or less, doesn't need to be even the same. Like if I more or less get the same results with a 2-hour trip, why would I do a 6-hour or even a 12-hour trip? If it's because it's just like it is like sort of. I always say like my with all the disclaimers, in a country where it's legal, LSD I heard is a very nice drug. I heard it at least, yeah. But it's a 12-hour trip. So that means, by the way, already like. That means that it's exceeding the shift of nurses. So you need 2 nurses, you hand over. Like so at the beginning, it was very much like, oh my God, psychedelics are amazing, which they are, by the way. But we always said, but they need to fit both in a regulatory and in a commercial framework.
Yeah.
So now that we're getting to approval for all these drugs, I think investors are starting to wake up and say, wait a moment, why would people pay like again, maybe even for an overnight stay, if the 12-hour trip is suddenly 14 hours, whatever, when I can have the same with 2 hours. Yeah. And then I think will sort of, I would say the next 12 months, the look of investors beyond the data on psychedelic stocks will be much more nuanced.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Chris, you've been seen as somewhat of a futurist. Obviously, you're looking at deep tech, longevity, blockchains, psychedelics. Let's say these drugs, we get out of these phase 3s, they go into commercialization. Where does the psychedelic industry go from there? Like, are you looking that far out to where, like, what, I don't want to call it the next iteration, but
but it's not so far. It's not so far. Like, I think
that's why I'm asking.
I think some will sell out completely to Big Pharma, which I think is wrong, because I do have, and like we always talk about money here, like about stocks and whatever, but like maybe some people who follow me on other like channels, whatever, or see other podcasts, I personally have a very sort of spiritual view in psychedelics, again, scientific and whatever. So, and I deeply believe that they are a special group of therapeutics which have to be handled with care. And I think a company which really focuses on it will do better than if one psychedelics ends up in this company, one psychedelic ends up in this company. So that's why I try to go the middle way, because obviously I know like sort of takeover fantasies, whatever is interesting for investors. But I want to go the way where I say I want to partner with pharma companies, as I said, maybe joint ventures for countries, whatever. But I want to keep at least as much control as I can over the commercialization process, because I think we will do it better than, again, when it ends up in some big pharma portfolio.
Yeah,
do we run the risk, if we're bought out by a big pharma company, of these drugs being shelved? Like, there's a lot of information that people read, and there's data out there. There's documentaries on Netflix that show what opioids have done. I asked Mike Tyson this interview 2 weeks ago in Germany about some of this stuff, and he's like, a different time, a different fight. And I thought that was pretty bang on, because it's 40 years later and we're just in a different time. Saying that, is that a possibility that, you know, big pharma would stay the status quo and a lot of these drugs would be shelved? Or are we basically past the line of the point of no return where people know too much now?
I think we passed that line. I think, look, can a drug, one of these compounds, be taken over by a pharma company and then kind of mishandled, not in a way that they make mistakes, but more like that it's kind of a stepchild? And because, like, by the way, don't forget, like, no matter how good a drug is, you need a professional sales force. This is it's not like, you know, like, it's not you're approved and sort of this is all done miraculously overnight by itself. There is a morphing or going from R&D to commercialization is a big sort of step and whatever. So can I see that maybe one or two of these smaller competitors of us are taken out, but then kind of get forgotten, or at least to dribble out? Do I think that pharma could really buy these compounds and then kind of keep them under the radar? No, it's too far and it's too obviously good. Like, again, if people look at the data yesterday, by the way, we just talked about the upside. Like, we had an enormous improvement in MADRS, but also we had no serious adverse side effect. Full stop. Run that study or a similar study with Xanax or whatever. The side effects are shit. It's not always only about the upside. It's also the gentle side effects profile, and people know that. Like, that is, I think, I'm really very, very confident. Meaning, I repeat myself all the time, but like, psychedelics have arrived in society. People are really just waiting.
I hear you.
To be available. I think that the commercial rollout will exceed the wildest expectations, because patients will go to their doctors and say, I know it's available now. Don't put me on the other stuff. Like,
agreed.
I want to do that. Yeah.
So that's the reason why don't get bought out. Work in partnership with Big Pharma, which they would obviously help with the infrastructure of the commercial road, I would think. Is that what you're kind of alluding to?
Yeah. There's various ways to partner. I mean, we do have discussions. I can't go into details, but like, but again, it's not always a full buyout. It's not always, you can have the cake and eat it, I think.
Yeah. Last thing I'll ask you, have you had any conversations with some key government officials from the U.S., with this new administration on some of this psychedelic research and therapy, or is it something you haven't entertained yet?
No, I did. I can't go into details, but they are across the board extremely supportive.
It's good. All right, we'll leave it at that. A good media report would probably push you hard, but I won't do that. I'll just keep it as is. How's that sound?
See what?
I said a good media reporter would probably push you harder and ask you more questions on who it was, but I won't go there. How's that?
A good chairman is trained to block that question in order to retain his confidentiality.
My next question was, is the person that you spoke to, is he related to JFK? And we'll just leave it at that, okay? But anyways. Listen, always good talking to you, and great feedback. I think it's great for the space, great for the industry. And I definitely know that a lot of our investors that watch us invest in crypto, invest in cannabis, and definitely psychedelics. And very hopeful, I think. I was just saying to Anthony earlier today, we talk about cannabis reform and how this could happen, in the next, hopefully this year. Well, we'll see how it happens, but don't look too far past psychedelics as well, because with your announcement you made yesterday and a lot of the trials that are going on, and with a lot of the feedback from the U.S. government, it looks to be very promising and a lot different from 12 months ago. So that's encouraging, to say the least.
Thank you.
All right. Listen, let's keep in touch. Sorry, you're going to say something?
No, thanks for having me on. As always, happy to come back.
Great. And let's keep in touch with each other, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Christian.
Bye.
All right. Interesting.
Future's bright for psychedelics. It's gonna be nice to see. Gonna be nice to see these companies get into commercialization, come to fruition.
Yeah, I liked how he said, I don't want to get bought out. I want to work in conjunction. There will be some players that will fully get bought out, and I'm not going to say who, but I already have a pretty good idea as to who that would be. But this man is it almost is like Mike Tyson and cannabis. Like, he consumes his own product and understands it. And Christian is definitely a big believer because it's changed his life. And he's also very successful business-wise as well. So, and if you want to ask whether he is or he isn't, quite the private placement he put forward. So let's see how things unroll over these next 6-12 months pertaining to the space. But I think it's very, very encouraging times.
Yeah.
By the way, before I let you go, ESPN released yesterday grades for all the NHL teams so far in the offseason. Your Panthers got an A+.
I mean, I don't think there's anything else you could give them.
It's crazy how good they well, when you win, it's good to attract and retain talent if you've got the money.
And just wait until the salary cap goes up next year.
I know,
we've got all our guys locked in. We'll be able to put one more superstar on this team.
Connor McDavid.
I would welcome him with open arms.
Yeah.
Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, if they'd love to come down to Florida, they're more than welcome to come down to Florida.
I saw a picture of McDavid's, I think it was his wife's birthday. It was on Instagram. And nice place, but, if you could live anywhere in North America, I would think some of these places, especially if you can net more dollars as well, that would be appealing, because there's not only you that you have to worry about, there's a wife and there's a family. And that's something that we don't always get a chance to see or know because it's not covered in the media landscape. But anyway, three-peat. Oh, Corey Perry to the Kings. Did you see that?
I did. I told you about that earlier.
Oh, yeah, you did. You did. What was that? A 1 year, $3.5 million deal?
1 year, 3.5 AAV. Yeah.
D. Finney. What's the Hawks? Exclamation point. What'd they do? Was that the Blackhawks, the Atlanta Hawks? Any TerraSend comments for today? Did you have any conversations since we found out the news on Monday regarding leaving Michigan?
No, I mean, the market seemed to like it yesterday. I mean, it's going to be about a 9% hit to top line, but apparently they'll have margin expansion and EBITDA expansion with dropping Michigan. It was a losing business unit for them.
Yeah. Okay. Just a quick heads up. We'll have a couple of evergreen videos out tomorrow, and I'll have the weekly recap set out for Sunday night. And we'll also have Anthony had a great interview. I know a lot of you people are talking about cannabis, but this is something you need to pay attention to, especially with what's going to happen with the crypto space in the next 30 to 60 days with this U.S. government. But Mark Yusko, who I don't know if any of you have seen some of the interviews we've done with him in the past before, but probably he could be the smartest person that we've had ever on our live stream. Very intelligent person. I don't want to sit here. That's actually not a great thing to say. We've had a lot of great people to say, but he is incredible. But very connected. And you maybe want to highlight some of the stuff that you guys touched on in that interview to tee it up.
Crypto, blockchain, treasury, AI, psychedelics, bunch of stuff, stable coins.
Oh, wow. Psychedelics too.
Yeah. Towards the
All
end.
right. So that's going, it's a pre-record. We're going to be off on Friday. And I want everybody just to enjoy and just kind of clear the head, and markets will be closed. So that'll be a pre-record. We're going to schedule that for the usual time, Friday at 11 a.m. Anthony's interview with Marc Cohodes. And again, evergreens tomorrow, 2 of them on Thursday, and then another one on Saturday, and then the weekly recap on Sunday. So that's it for the live stream this week. But as always, appreciate everybody for logging on here. The TDR Traded Black podcast presented by Dutchie, our new title sponsor. So big thanks to all the Dutchie team members for being the official sponsor of the Traded Black podcast. Don't forget to scan QR code if you want a full recap of this week so far versus waiting for the video on Sunday. Make sure to scan that QR code to become a daily baked in newsletter subscriber. AV, enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep.
Happy July 4th to all of our American viewers. Enjoy your long weekend, and we'll see you back here Monday at 4 o'clock live on the Trade to Black podcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
So what'd you think of all that information? Some interesting stuff that we just learned once again here at the TDR Trade to Black podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. So leave your comments below. We'd love to get your feedback. As usual, if you have time, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash on that bell for all notifications. And stay connected with us here at the Trade to Black podcast. Thanks for watching, everyone.